This is the complete guide to Claude Code for business owners. Claude just passed ChatGPT to become #1 in the App Store, and that's because everyone's finding out that it's the most powerful AI tool for businesses. If you set it up right, Claude won't forget what you tell it, it'll get better every time you use it, and it'll finally be able to automate your work. And don't worry, because you actually don't need to write a single line of code to use it. The main reason why people fail with Claude is that they completely skip setting up the right foundation. So in this video, I'll walk you through the 3-layer AI operating system. And honestly, most AI explanations are way too technical, so we're going to simplify everything and walk through it step by step. First, we have your business context, so your AI is always grounded in accurate information. Second, your data sources, so it's able to pull from real-time data across your apps and systems. And then finally, AI workflows, and this is how you're going to actually automate everyday tasks across your business. By the way, I'm Thaddeus. I'm a former senior data scientist, and I'm the co-founder of Elevate, where we build AI systems for small to mid-sized businesses every day. Then I break it down here for free. So let's get into it. But before we build your AI OS, let's do a quick tour of how you can use Claude so you know your way around. There are 3 ways to use Claude: Chat, Cowork, and Code. And the easiest way to think about it is just ask yourself, what do you actually need right now? If you need to think through something, brainstorm, or just get a quick answer, that's Claude Chat. It works the same way as ChatGPT. It remembers some things about you over time, like your preferences and your background, but at the end of the day, the chat feature mostly gives you answers, and you're still the one that has to do the work or take that output and then copy it somewhere else. If you need Claude to actually do the work for you, that's Cowork. Cowork can access the files on your computer, connect to your different tools, and then run tasks in parallel so you can get a lot done at once. So while you're writing a draft for a client, you can be pulling analytics for a different one, and you can even run scheduled tasks without you being there. Then there's Claude Code. This is the full workspace. It can take any action on your computer that you give it permission to. Now, before you skip ahead, I just want to be clear that you don't actually need a code at all to use Claude Code. You just talk to it in simple prompts just like you did in Chat and Cowork. But its unique capability is that it can build new tools and apps that you can't get anywhere else. This means you can finally have custom tools and software exactly how your business and how your brain works, not how someone else decided they should. And this is what we're going to work on setting up today in our AI OS. By the way, what we're building works in both Claude Cowork and Code. I'm using Code in this video because it gives me more control over my setup, but once we build this out, we can plug it into Claude Cowork or Code, just depending on our needs. This is what Claude Code looks like when running inside VS Code. So VS Code is the free code editor that I have here. You can see the files in our project here on the left. Then I also have my Claude Code chat open on the right. You can always see what's in your project and read it as needed, so you don't need to worry about constantly uploading context documents. And right now I have it hooked up to our AI team brain. This is a shared and synced up file system across my team. So everyone on my team can operate with the same exact context and memory. It constantly is updated by everything we build, every decision we log, and every workflow we create. So the whole team has access to it automatically. If you want me to go deeper on this in a future video, just let me know in the comments and I can do a full breakdown of how to set up your own team AI operating system. So that's what Claude Code is. It's the most powerful way to use Claude because it lives inside your work and has access to take any action. But a powerful tool by itself doesn't just run your business. So now let me show you the system that makes it actually useful, and it really comes down to these 3 layers. Now here's the mistake almost everybody makes. They skip straight to layer 3, the AI workflows. Then they're surprised when the output is generic, but of course it is because the AI didn't have much to actually work with. And this isn't just my opinion. Anthropic, the company that makes Claude, published research showing that AI is capable of handling over 90% of business and finance tasks. But if you take a look at the actual adoption rate, it's just a tiny fraction of what the capability actually is today. And from what I've seen working with small teams, the gap isn't AI, it's the foundation. People download the tool, speed through the setup, and then get generic results and then conclude that AI can't do the task. But when you take the time to give AI your business context, your data, and your workflows, the output is completely different. And that's the opportunity right now. Most people aren't doing this, which means if you set this up and take action, you're already going to be ahead of many other businesses. Think about it this way. If you hired someone new and their first draft was rough, you wouldn't just fire them. You'd give them more context. You show them examples of what it looks like to do the job well. You give them feedback. That's exactly how this works too. So we're going to be going over 7 total components across 3 layers. The first layer only takes about 10 minutes to set up if you start from the template that I'm providing. So let me show you how this whole thing works, and let's start from the first layer. And one more thing before we dive in. Andrej Karpathy, who co-founded OpenAI and used to lead AI Tesla, calls what we're about to do context engineering. He said prompt engineering is giving AI a short task description, but context engineering is the delicate art and science of filling the context window with just the right information for the AI to do the best job. So that's what this framework is really about. It's a way to organize the context that your AI needs from the foundation up. All right, let's build it. Layer 1 is business context. This is the foundation. Without this, Claude is basically starting from scratch every single conversation. And there are two pieces to this layer. Instructions, which is what you tell Claude, and then memory, which is what Claude learns over time as you work with it. Let's start with instruction. The file at the center of this is called the CLAUDE.md. You can think of it like the main instructions of your Claude that lives inside your project folder. Claude reads it automatically every time you start a new session, so you don't need to remind Claude that exists. It'll just know every chat. That means every single thing Claude does in a session is shaped by what's in that file. But one of the biggest mistakes people make is trying to put every possible thing about their business in these instructions. If you add too much, your output gets worse, Claude responds slower, and your AI bill goes up. Here's how to think about it. If you had a new hire, you want to give them an overview of your business so they have a broad understanding within their first week on the job. And in this overview, you're also telling them where to look if they need to go deeper into any part of your business. Okay, so I have this demo CLAUDE.md file here, and this is really where you're going to put the main overview and instructions of your business. So here I have a fictional 10-person marketing agency called the Sunset Creative Company. So this is just a reference, and you can customize it completely yourself. So what is a CLAUDE.md? Claude will read this automatically every time you start a session, so there's no upload, pasting, or reminder of the information in here. Everything Claude does in this session is going to be shaped by what's in this file, and so that's why you want to be really intentional, and I recommend this is the first file you create and share with your team when they're using Claude Code. I have a template also in the AI Workflows Academy community, so the link should be in the description, and you can basically put that into any AI tool and just ask it to interview you and fill out this template based on your answers. So you can do that in just a few minutes. It's much easier, and I strongly recommend that you get AI to fill out this information for you. And also you want to keep it to a maximum of 200 to 300 lines. So if it gets too long, you're going to want to just break it up into sections, and you can reference, like I have an example here. If your business details get long, you can just put the rest of it in a company overview document. And that's actually what I do for myself. So you're making sure that you're not trying to cram too much information into every session that you do with Claude Code, because at some point the performance is going to get worse because you're just giving it too much information to sort through every time it needs to do a task. And just for some ideas, this basically our entire agency and company, we operate from this same central team AI brain where we have all of our files and instructions, our workflows, the skills, etc. So our CLAUDE.md file got a little bit long. So now we break it up into these different documents. And then as you can see here, you can just have a reference to any of these documents. So if it turns out you have a lot of different services that you provide your clients or your stakeholders, you can put that in your services document. And in your CLAUDE.md, you can just tag it so it knows if it needs more services information based on what you're asking it to do, it knows where to get that information. So there's the who we are, what we do, who we serve, what's your ideal client profile, what's the team, what's everyone's roles, what are your priorities. There's how you work. So what's your process, who has decision authority. You're going to want rules for Claude. So always do these certain things. Never do these certain things. And this might seem like a lot, but as you go on, this will just naturally get built out, because as you're working, you'll notice things that you never want Claude to do or things that you do want Claude to make sure it does. So don't worry about having a 200-line CLAUDE.md file right out the gate. I think it will naturally develop, and taking your time to develop it will probably just make sure that the CLAUDE.md file you end up with really suits how you want to get your work done. You could have your tech stack here, all the reference context files, and then here's just some instructions about updating it. So yeah, I highly recommend just getting that template, get AI to help you fill it out. You're just going to drag it in here into this folder, and then make sure it's not labeled demo-CLAUDE.md. That's just for my demo purposes. If you name it Claude.md, then Claude will know that that's the main instructions file that you want for this project. And so let's actually test it out and ask it something that it would only know if it read the demo Claude.md files. What are the rules for collaborating in our AI Team Brain workspace? Okay, so as you can see, it really knows our process. So here's the team setup, how we share and sync information, what our session protocol is, we're starting and ending the day, our data rules. So what should be, where should our databases go versus static documents, where are our skills stored, our workspace rules, our file naming conventions. So as you can tell, we've been developing our CLAUDE.md a lot, and we put a lot of time to this because it helps us all stay on the same page. So just start with a template and then keep iterating until you get it exactly how you want to work. So here are 3 tips to keep in mind when you're building your own. First, order matters. Claude reads top to bottom and treats the earlier content as higher priority. So put your most important rules towards the top. Second, aim for 200 to 300 lines as a soft limit. If your Claude.md file gets too bloated, Claude will start to get less focused on what actually matters. So if it grows too long, break different sections out into their own reference files, and then in the Claude.md, use the @mentions to reference them like I showed you. Boris, the creator of Claude Code, said himself that he's constantly trying to keep his Claude.md file as concise as possible and will even delete his and start fresh sometimes to keep it from getting too long. And third, write your rules in the never do X, always do Y format. Being really specific is better than being vague when you're dealing with AI. Remember, these are machines and we need to speak in more machine-like logic. And throw in examples because they get way better the more examples you give them. And here's your friendly reminder too, don't try to just write this all by hand. Just tell Claude what you're trying to do and use it to help you do this faster. Now, if you've never set this up before, here's the quickest path from you to get from where you are to working. You're going to download VS Code, which is free, install the Claude Code extension, sign in to connect your Anthropic account, open any folder, drop in the Claude.md template that I gave you and customize it for yourself, and then just start working. You'll know what other project files and things you need to add as you try to do tasks, and then Claude tells you that it needs that information. And if you ever get stuck, here's the simplest trick. Take a screenshot of your screen, paste it into your AI tool like Claude, and just say, what do I do now? It basically works every time. All right, the second piece of layer 1 is memory. Claude.md is what you write for Claude, and it's mostly static. You set it up, and then you just update it when things change in your business. Memory is different. Memory is what Claude writes for itself, and it's always changing. So every session, Claude is quietly learning how you work and saving what it picks up into its memory. And the difference is intentional. So Claude.md is for rules that matter every single time, every session, and memory is for things that Claude picks up along the way and then chooses when to dynamically tap into. Things like preferences, decisions, patterns, stuff that Claude notices about how you like things done. So let's talk about how to find your memory here. All right, so you're going to go over to Finder, and I'm on Mac here. You're going to hit Command-Shift-H. That's going to take you to your home folder. Then a lot of these files, when you deal with Claude and Claude Code, are actually hidden. So you're going to hit Command-Shift-Period, and then now you can see all the hidden files. So you're going to double-click on this .claude here. Then you're going to go over to Projects. Then you're going to go ahead and select wherever you've been operating. So this is my AI team brain here. And then you're going to click on whatever project you're on because the memory is saved by project. So you're going to go into this project and then you're going to scroll down and then you'll see a folder that says memory here. So once you could click into it, that I like to sort it by recency. So you'll see what's called the memory.md here. That's just what Claude is automatically remembering. So Claude Code already has a auto memory feature, but then you could ask Claude yourself to remember things. So a good example is recently I had Claude Code go ahead and respond to my email, create a Stripe invoice and send it to a client that we were working with. It drafted up an invoice that had the wrong payment terms. So we were supposed to have a 15-day payment period, but it had a 30-day payment period. And I noticed that in the contract itself, so if I click into this, you can read what my correction was. So the rule that I gave it was when creating Stripe invoices for brand deals, always read the contract first and match the payment due date exactly. Never default to 30 days. So this is the feedback that I just typed naturally, in this window. I just typed it into Claude here and said, remember to not do this in the future. And it just saved as a file here. And of course, it'll show you the piece of feedback and you can approve it, but you don't need to go through and edit these files manually. You can just ask Claude to do it. All right, here's what matters about memory. Claude builds up memory automatically as you work together, your preferences, patterns, habit, and you don't have to tell it to remember it. It'll do it on its own, although you can. But if you want to be sure, you could prompt it to remember specific things. And the more you work with Claude, the more it will actually remember. After 20 or 30 sessions, that can actually backfire on you. It might start to remember things that you actually don't want it to. If there are too many memories and they start to conflict, Claude can actually get less focus. So Anthropic did build something called Auto Dream recently. Think of it like how your brain works at night. It sorts through everything and keeps what matters and then cleans out the rest. It's still rolling out, so you might not see it as a feature, but you can still manually trigger it right now. You can just ask Claude something like consolidate my memory files after the end of a long working session. And here's my favorite part. You can edit memory files directly. They're just simple text markdown files. So if Claude remembered something wrong, you can just open the file and fix it or delete it yourself. And if you want to add a rule manually, you can do that. Now, here's what most people miss about memory in a business setting. The highest value memories aren't just preferences, they're decisions. A lot of the times our AI tools can see what we're doing, but if we don't give it the information, it doesn't know the reasoning behind those decisions. So I think a great habit to develop is really when you're asking Claude to complete certain tasks or giving it feedback, make sure you're providing the why behind those decisions so we can start to learn how to make decisions and get work done like you. Then at the end of a work session, you can just say log what I decided today, why I decided it, it, and what's next. Then in your next session, whether it's you or somebody else on your team, Claude doesn't just know what happened, but it knows those reasonings behind those decisions, and anyone can ask about them. And this is the kind of information that Claude really needs to get better at its suggestions and ability to do your work. One thing that makes this whole system work for people who don't code is that you never have to manually edit any of these files. Your instructions, your skills, your tools, your automations. So if a rule comes up, you can just say, update my CLAUDE.md to include this because of that reason. Claude will make the change and then show it to you to review. Then you can choose to refine it or just hit approve. So that's the rule that I want you to really keep in mind. Let Claude maintain Claude. So that's layer 1, business context, instructions that you tell Claude, and memory that Claude builds up over time. Together, they mean your AI is never starting from scratch and really understands your business. But just knowing about your business isn't that useful on its own. Claude also needs to be able to connect and interact with your apps and business data. So let's talk about the next layer. Layer 2 is data sources. This is how Claude reaches your tools, documents, and data you already use every day. Without this layer, Claude can think about your business, but it can't actually touch any of the places where your work is getting done. If we were onboarding an employee, you can think of the layer 1 business context like giving them the job description, but now layer 2 is about giving them the access to the systems and technology to actually get the work done. First up is tools. This is how Claude connects to the apps you already work in. Notion, Slack, Gmail, Calendar, GitHub, Google Sheets, the whole tech stack that your business runs on. And the technology that makes this work is called MCP. Model Context Protocol. And it sounds technical and complicated, but just know that it's how Claude talks to all of your other apps. You set up these connections once, and Claude can read, write, and take actions in those tools from that point on. And you might get a little lost in how to connect your apps through MCP, so here are 2 ways. In the Claude desktop app, navigate to connectors, browse until you find the one you want, then log into that app. The second method is adding it through the Claude Code chat interface. You can just say something like, I want to connect my Slack to Claude Code, read the documentation from Slack, and let me know how I can do that. It'll find the right MCP, run whatever commands it needs to install it, and then it'll walk you through how to authenticate and log into that app. And just start with a few. So some of the top ones I would definitely recommend connecting first would be whatever you use for file storage, calendars, emails, and chatting with your team. So for example, my first ones were Notion and Google Drive, Google Calendar, Gmail, and Slack. All right, so when we talk about connecting apps, we can just hit /MCP and then hit enter, and then you'll see all the MCP servers you have here. I suggest if you don't already have a tech stack list of your business, I think that'd be great. Yeah, I just have a ton here. You can see AI meeting notes, Google Drive, Slack, Asana, Beehive for newsletters. That one came out recently. Canva, Gmail, yeah. Anything that I would normally do work in, I want to be able to do that work through Claude Code, so that's where MCP comes in. Make sure you get your connections in, and you're going to have to reauthorize them every few days or few weeks, so it can be a little bit of a pain, but it's for security reasons, so I get it. Now let's just go ahead and test this out. So what are the top tasks that are due for me today? Great. And the beauty behind setting up your business context properly is that I don't actually need to mention when I want Claude to access Notion or Google Drive or Slack or whatever. It'll just know what to tap into based on your request. And there you go. You can see it's searching the Notion database. It's searching for things specifically due today. Great. And now it just gave me a report. So it says high priority. We have some tasks here, finalizing some free resources, what I'm doing right now. So this is definitely accurate. I'm doing 11 different live demos. So I hope this is helpful. And let me know what you want to see more of, because I want to make content that really helps you figure out how to use AI best for your work and your business. And then I'm reviewing another script later today. So medium priority, we have the demo folder, and my co-founder is working with a client on the consulting side of the business. So it actually accesses a team database so we can see each other's tasks and really stay in sync. It also took a look at my calendar. So it's telling me about any upcoming meetings that I need to prepare for. And it's telling me what's coming up for me tomorrow. So as you can see, it's really powerful. The key thing to remember is that once you set all this up, you just really have to ask one chatbot to get whatever you want to get done, and it'll know to tap into any tools or the context or the information, as long as you really take the time to set up these 3 layers of your AI OS properly. Don't worry about connecting everything at once, and I think the best way to find out what you should connect next is by continuously asking Claude to do more of your everyday tasks, then just observe where it breaks because of a lack of access. Then you've just identified the next MCP that you should go about connecting. All right, the second piece in layer 2 is files. This is your documents, SOPs, proposals, your past work, anything in a file format that you'd want Claude to read. Most people don't realize how much value is sitting on their computer right now. Think about the last proposal you did that landed you that contract, or the top performing ads that have generated the most amount of leads for your business. If Claude could read all of those files, then every future piece of work would start from that level of quality instead of from scratch. So it's going to take some time, but I highly recommend gathering all of your best SOPs, your best client feedback documents, your top project briefs, your best performing ads or content. All of that can become input. That's going to make your AI have dramatically better output. And most of it's probably sitting in a Google Drive or your hard drive somewhere. So here I have my agency Elevates AI Team Brain, and you can just see I have all my different files here. So right now, this Claude Code session can tap into any files. And this is basically a repository of everything across the business. So if I open this About section, the way I think about things in the About section is anything that's an overview of us and our business and who we are, as well as our customers. So there's things like the company voice, the company overview, the brand voice, but then we also have our audience voice file and then also our ICPs. That's just from the customer research we've done, as well as conversations that we've had with a lot of clients. So I kind of think of that as the overall foundational lens that Claude is going to see all of your work through. But now we're talking about files for everything else in the business. So for example, I like to put our different business areas in the areas folder here. You can just see all the different types of content we make. And for example, if I go to long form, which I just started recently, you can see all the different things we have here. So we have our PowerPoint decks, we have the actual scripts, we have the overall strategy for that part of the business. And if I go into scripts here, you can see I have an archive, future ideas, every video here. I didn't decide just one day to build out the entire folder hierarchy the specific way. The way I did it and the way I'd recommend is by describing what you're trying to get out of Claude Code and out of AI, and then just asking it, what is the best way to organize this information? So a lot of this I just discovered from going back and forth with Claude and really figuring out what would be an easy way for Claude to know where to look to access my information, which, by the way, we covered in the CLAUDE.md file. Claude will basically maintain that instructions file to make sure that it's giving it basically a table of contents of everything that's in our AI team brain. So based on your requests, it'll know where to look because we followed an actual structure when we were building out all of our files. And here's a quick example of how easily it can navigate this whole file system. So I just typed in an example here. I just got this inbound lead, help me reply. And this is basically a pretend 12-person consulting firm that's saying they're stuck using AI. They saw my YouTube channel and they want to reach out. So here's another shortcut, by the way. There's different modes that you can use Claude Code. So if you're doing something that's not risky at all, like just writing a reply email, I like to do bypass permissions. If I'm doing something that's a little more risky, I'll leave it on whatever the auto mode is so that for more risky things, it doesn't take actions that I might not want it to. And here's actually a shortcut. You can just hit Shift Tab and it'll auto rotate between the mode there. So let's see exactly what it comes up with. Here you can see it's computing. It's deciding to read my voice guide. It's checking for my email templates. It knows that I made a change to it yesterday. So it's remembering the fixes and the adjustments I gave it so I don't have to repeat myself. And here we go. Maya is a textbook Path C inbound. Warm came through the 3-layer AIOS video. Here's the reply applying email 00B, which was locked in yesterday. Decision number 144. I've been working this way for a while and it still shocks me how it's able to just pick up on things, make corrections, never forget that correction again, and then just apply exactly what you say. So, hi Maya, thanks for reaching out. Totally hear you. There's so much noise out there. We're finding a lot of teams are stuck with the same problem you're talking about. It repeats sort of back the main issue. It says that it is fixable if it is a fixable problem, and then says the next step is a 30-minute discovery call, and then it actually, if you click on this link, provides the actual link to book an AI discovery call with my team. So it explains, here's explaining all the rules it came up with. So there's a 100-word ceiling, the 75-word target. It's not doing any research. It's mirroring her pain back to her in the response. It doesn't name exactly what service. We have different services for different teams and different packages. So we don't like to be too quick and say exactly what our service is before we learn enough about the incoming lead. Also, it's remembering to not use we, because so far my co-founder was not introduced yet. And that's another correction that I gave it. So I think you get the idea. Once you adopt this workflow for days and weeks, it starts to just get what you want done without you having to go back and forth. Honestly, I might just make very minor tweaks, but that would be fine for me if that actually went out to that inbound lead. So you don't need a massive library to start. If you just have 10 or 15 documents, that's enough to see a massive improvement. Your best proposals, content, your core SOPs, start with what you already have access to and then just add more as you need it. And you might be wondering, how many examples do I need to give Claude in order to get a task done? And the answer is honestly, however many it takes to get reliable, high quality output for that task. For some tasks, I'd say we'd just start with 5 strong examples. But if this is for really important work, I'd say shoot for 10 or more examples just to make sure that Claude can learn from enough examples. But if you just rely on files, you're gonna hit a ceiling and some serious limitations. So this next piece is what solves those problems. The third piece to layer 2 is databases. And honestly, this might be the most undervalued thing right now that you can set up in your AI operating system. And here's why. So files are great for documents you read top to bottom, your brand voice guides and SOP or your proposals, but files are static. So the moment something changes, that file gets outdated until someone updates it. You can't just put your entire client history, your content pipeline, and your entire project tracker into one document. It would be thousands of lines long, and eventually Claude wouldn't know what to focus on. So databases solve both of those problems. They're structured so Claude can query exactly what it needs instead of reading through everything. And they're live, so when your team updates a task or closes a deal, Claude sees the latest version automatically. No one has to remember to update every instance in which you've uploaded that static context files of all these different projects or skills. These are the systems that your business actually runs on day to day, and when Claude can reach them directly and pull live data, that's when the entire setup becomes way more powerful. So I'm going to open up a new chat just by clicking that. I'm going to go to Shift Tab and hit bypass mode. So before we were just tapping into context files that I have saved in the AI team brain that had templates and things about our company and how we respond to leads, and it was able to respond to that question. But now we're talking about databases, and this is perfect to basically search through and analyze structured data. So here's an example of one of our databases. We have our audience voice bank. So when we're having things like sales calls or we're just having regular client meetings, we're constantly trying to figure out what are the problems and the pain points and how does our ideal audience speak so that we could use the same language and be able to solve their problems even better. So we can use the same language and be better at meeting them where they are. And we use Claude to build out this whole database. So we use Fireflies to capture our meeting notes. It's an AI tool. And then Claude will analyze those meeting notes and then add to our audience voice bank here. So we have a name for what they said. We strip out the exact quote. We have a theme, what the pain point is, the role, who the person is, the size company they work at, their industry, and a whole bunch of other more sensitive information. So now we're able to analyze information, but do way better analysis of the data. I can just toss in a prompt here. It says, use our brand voice guide and our audience voice bank. Find the 3 most mentioned customer pain points from the last 60 days of entries. For each pain, write a hook in our brand voice that we could use on our sales page or a LinkedIn post. And let's see how this goes. Anytime we're writing copy, it's going to tap into my voice guide. Looking at the brand voice file, it's querying Notion for the last 60 days. I don't really see people talk about this, but we have a brand voice that's more higher level in general. But then also for everyone on my team, we have our own voice guide. And that's just because sometimes we need to say things in my voice. Sometimes it's my co-founder or somebody else on the team. So just a random nuance. I think in most cases, there should be a difference between how exactly you speak and then how your brand's marketing should be. And here you can see it's tapping into the audience voice bank and it's just reading through the rows. This is like kind of just seeing its code snippet. You don't really need to pay attention to that, but you can see the action that it's taking within the tool. So now it's searching for pain point and it found the right database. And then hopefully you see how easy it becomes to say a certain message, but then let's say you have 3 different customer segments across your business. You can easily say tailor for each segment, and you have this growing database of all the examples of how they speak and their pain points so that you can tailor that language to the different customers. Here we go. We have 21 voice bank entries from the last 60 days. So we can see the different mentions of what pain points came up. Fear and overwhelm is the top one. Adoption resistance. I don't know what an MCP is. A lot of this is still a little too intimidating. MCP, skills, connectors, agents. Most AI explainers throw 4 new terms at you in the first 30 seconds. Fix isn't another course. It's one person who can translate so it's not perfect, but hopefully it can give you an idea of the direction to go in. So maybe if you're working on some marketing material or you're working to create a better script for your salespeople, you can take a look at the top pain points that are surfacing. Here we go. Adoption resistance got 4 mentioned. So a year goes by, nothing gets built. It's just a big pill to swallow. I found the benefits, but I was never able to implement them. Yeah, actually, I like this one actually more than the first one. So most companies start their AI initiative, but never finish one. A year goes by, you hire a consultant, you sit through workshops, you leave with a deck of opportunities and 0 working systems. I might use this on my next video, but you get the idea. So databases are really powerful, especially for structured data, and especially when you want to slice your information in different ways and be able to do much richer analysis than if you just had a bunch of files scattered across your AI team brain. And here's why this really matters. The reason why so much AI output sounds generic is because it usually doesn't have access to enough information of where all your work is actually getting done. So when you give it your past work, your structured data, and your live databases, that's when you finally get AI output that doesn't just sound like everything else on the internet, but starts to sound like your business and your work. That's the whole point of layer 2. This will really become the foundation of your business that can then be plugged into any AI tool. Today, we're setting this up in Claude Code, but if a better AI tool comes out next week, you can easily plug that new tool into the same foundation that you've built that has all of your business context and data in one place. And that means Claude is ready to do actual work. So that's layer 3. Sitting at the top of this AI OS, we have AI workflows. And this is the part that everybody wants to get to, where you can take a task that used to take you hours and then get it done in minutes or have it completely automated. But this only works if you have layer 1 and 2 already in place, so make sure you don't skip those. Before I walk through this layer, let me define what an AI workflow actually is, because this term gets thrown around a lot and people use it in many different ways. An AI workflow is the process of using AI-powered technologies and products to automate tasks and streamline activities within an organization. So basically, you can think of it as any way you're going to be able to use AI to speed up or automate tasks in your work. And I know that's a broad definition, but let's break it down. There are 2 types of AI workflows. AI assisted, where you're driving the work with AI. This might look like you just going back and forth in a Claude project to refine a presentation or deliverable that you're working on for a client. Then we have automated, and this might be a system that runs at the same time every day or something that's triggered by an event. Workflows that go at a scheduled time are pretty self-explanatory, so let's talk a little bit about the event-triggered ones. For example, you could have one that when you get a submission to the contact form in your company's website, this could then trigger an automated AI workflow for leads. And it could look something like this. Based on the information in the contact form, you run a research report on who they are and their company. It then determines if they're qualified for your services based on the findings. Then it can send them a personalized email if they're qualified to book a call with your sales team. And if you're thinking, wow, that's great, but there's no way people are really automating really valuable tasks and businesses, right? Well, think again, because here are 2 examples. Anthropic's marketing team for Claude was one single non-technical employee. And while he's been running their marketing, they've went from 0 to $14 billion in annual revenue in just 3 years, officially becoming the fastest growing business of all time. Alex Hormozi, who's a well-known entrepreneur and author, shared that for his last book launch, which broke a world record, by the way, he had 5 AI agents that fully handled 120,000 customer support tickets, and they were able to solve 90% of the incoming tickets without any human intervention. And with that, let's walk through some real examples of AI workflows. AI-assisted workflows are great, and for the vast majority of people, this is actually the right place to start. First, we have prompts. These are just the instructions you give your AI. You can just ask Claude a question, and then you get a response back, and then you just send one back and forth like having a conversation. Now, initially, when chatbots like ChatGPT became popular, people were basically using AI the same way they used Google. They just typed in a question and then had a few keywords, hit enter, and then they hoped that they got something useful back. But now that we're using AI to get the work done, there's a big difference in how we need to approach these tools compared to how we used to Google things. So here's a better mental model that I want you to remember on how we should treat AI. AI has been trained on every subject, so you can think of it as having a PhD in every subject with a genius level IQ. The only problem is that it's coming to you like it's day 1 on a brand new job. So if you're expecting to ask AI quick questions about your work or business and you want the responses to be helpful, you're going to need to provide enough information so that the output can actually be useful to your specific situation. So to help you and to make it easy for you to structure your prompts so that AI can get enough information, we're going to use the CARE framework. You don't need to use this for every time you prompt AI, especially if it's just a quick task. But if you're going to do more important work, and especially if it's something you're going to repeat over time, I'd recommend this structure for writing your prompt out. Context: what you're trying to accomplish, who the output is for, are there constraints, who do you want Claude to act as, like acting like a senior marketer. Action: one clear task. What is it that you want the AI to do? Result: This is what the output should look like, the format, the tone, the length, if you have any rules. Then examples, and this I think is the most important feature. This is where you put in examples of what good looks like, and this I think is the most underrated part of prompting. AI can detect patterns, so if you give it enough examples, oftentimes that's where it actually learns the most. And here's a real one that I use every morning for my daily scheduling and planning. And there are two best practices to keep in mind when you're doing AI prompting. First, you're going to want to use Markdown when you're writing your prompts. Markdown is that format with all the hashtags for the headings, and it's basically machine-readable language for AI. And there are 3 reasons why this matters for your business. First, Claude understands this structured input better than just a wall of text. The headers and bullets tell it what's context, what's the ask, what's the example, so you're going to get the result you're looking for way faster. Second, it'll lower your AI bill. Markdown is the most efficient format for AI to compute. Reports of OpenAI's own developer community benchmarked prompts in several different formats, and they saw a 15 to 30% cost savings across real workloads. And when you're scaling your team and everyone starts using AI across their work, these savings can really add up. And third, there's no vendor lock-in because it works everywhere. So if you decide to switch tools or migrate your documents to a different provider, Markdown will make sure that any switching in the future happens smoothly. All right, the second tip is what I call the reverse engineer prompt, and it's actually my favorite way to create prompts. Here's how it works. Once you've finished a conversation going back and forth in your AI chat, and you finally produce the output you're happy with, paste this in at the end of your conversation. Reverse engineer our entire conversation and write one prompt that would have produced the final response in one go. Turn all specifics into placeholders, structure it in Markdown, keep it clean, minimal, and reusable. Now you have a reusable prompt template that you can start with any time you do with that same task. By the way, once you do this enough times, you might end up with a long but unorganized list of helpful prompts, especially if everyone on your team is creating their own prompts. So eventually you're going to need a prompt library. You can keep it simple to start. Just throw in the full prompt, make sure there's a column showing a unique ID, which trust me is going to come in handy once you have 10, 20 prompts related to your sales process. You're going to want to make sure you don't just say use that sales prompt. Then you're going to add a field for the purpose of the prompt and then categorize it by your business function. If you want my full prompt library templates, I have one for Google Sheets and for Notion. You can find those in the link in the description. Now, prompts are a great place to start, but once you've identified repeated workflows, you definitely need to start creating skills. I've talked about skills in the past and I have an entire video on Claude skills for teams, but I really think that this is the most important capability that businesses should be racing to build. So what is a skill exactly? A skill is a modular work block. Think of it as a standard operating procedure for your AI. You just need to write out in detail how you complete a task or process in your work. Then AI will follow the same steps and produce the same quality output. And there are 3 ways to trigger a skill. You can select it from a menu by typing in a slash and then navigating to your skill. You can call it by name by just saying run my team close skill, or, and this is my favorite, you can just say what task you want to do and Claude will recognize when a request that you've made matches up with one of its skills and then just use it automatically. And at the top of each skill, there is a description section and that's what Claude reads to decide when it needs to use that skill automatically. So it's important to write a great description, which of course Claude can help you do as well. Now, there are 2 main ways to get skills. The first way is to just download skills that already exist. Anthropic publishes their own set of skills. In the customized menu within the Anthropic desktop app, you can easily go to skills, click the plus button, and then browse through the official skills for Anthropic, and then install them. And then they're basically ready to use. You can also download plugins which have basically a collection of skills, so they might have 5 or 6 skills all bundled together under their marketing plugin. And there are also community marketplaces. So websites like Claude Marketplace or Skills.md have a ton of options. And GitHub has an entire ecosystem of open source skills where people just publish ones they build for free. And it's really simple most of the time. You can just copy the URL from the GitHub page, paste it back into your Claude and say, I want to install this plugin, walk me through it. But honestly, I think there's a little bit too much hype of getting plugins and skills from these marketplaces. If you want the way you do your work to be unique and differentiated, you're going to need to put more effort into customizing and crafting your own skills for your business context. But they can be an amazing place to start and give you ideas of things that you might not have come up with on your own. And the second way to approach skills is to build them on your own. And that's what most businesses eventually do because the most valuable skills are the ones that are specific to how your business actually operates. Now let's start by being clear about what not to do because almost everyone makes this mistake when they start building their first skills. The wrong way to build skills is to sit down and describe every step of your workflow to Claude and then say, build a skill that does exactly this. that almost never works because we're not actually very good at describing our own work in detail. When we write down our own work, we often leave out important details that really make all the difference. Things like the nuanced judgment calls, the deeper reasoning behind your actions, and the different choices you were considering at each step. All of that is part of your true expertise that needs to be extracted into the skill so that I could finally produce results that's similar to yours. So here's the better approach that you can try. Do your entire workflow with Claude step by step. Run one real task normally the way you would. Let Claude see exactly what apps you're using, what data you're pulling, and narrate the decisions that you're making at each step. You can even use a voice dictation tool or just a voice memo on your phone to make it easier. Then when you're done, give Claude all of this information and tell it to look at your whole working session and turn that process into a repeatable skill. Now, when you read that skill back, it might actually feel overwhelming and too detailed, but that's actually what you want. Remember, we're writing for machines, and machine logic is way more explicit and detailed than regular instructions we're used to giving to other people. All right, let me show you a real skill that prioritizes and plans your entire day. All right, so let's go over skills. If I go to skills here, this is a shared system between my whole team. So we can run this in the desktop app and also Claude Code here. So if I just show you one of mine, I know there's a lot here. The best thing about skills is that they're just used when you do that workflow. So you don't need to think and memorize every single skill that you have. So if I go to the team start skill, you can go just take a look at what this is really quick. This is our team session orientation for my co-founder and I. It runs a 2-minute briefing at the start of the work session, gives us our active projects or priorities, and then tells us basically what we need to focus on. So yeah, you could kind of see the information here. And here's something that I don't see people talk about at all. You can reference live databases in skills so that you don't have a bunch of static files everywhere. So instead of saying these are our tasks, I can just say our tasks live in this database. And now that skill, whoever runs it at any time or any time in the future, it'll always pull from that same database. So this becomes really useful as you develop more skills so they're not constantly becoming stale and going out of date. So let's actually run this. And like I mentioned, there are different ways. So you could hit / and then start typing in the skill and select it. Or you can just say, all right, I'm just starting my day. Help me plan out what I should work on today. And as you saw, I didn't even need to say team start skill like I mentioned. And that's what really, in my opinion, makes this system work so well. Okay, so it's running my THAAD GTD skill. So that's I personalized this start skill to basically have some personal things for me. And the reason is kind of nuanced, but I have a mixture of work things that I wanted to pull in, but also personal. So my co-founder and I found that basically if you have some personal databases, just make a personal copy of skills that you need to pull in some personal data. So a little bit of an advanced move, but I'm sure at some point you're going to want to figure out how do I use AI to manage both work and life. So that's a little bit of an insight of how I'm currently managing it, but please let me know if you find a better way. Perfect. And you can see it's going into my tasks database, my projects database. It's going through my Google Calendar events. And here's a little advanced move. So you can actually use sub-agents that work in parallel. So I had a pretend lead earlier that was from Highland Consulting. So I can just say, pull some recent news and, do some research. And I can just say, use a sub-agent. And you don't need to wait for tasks to finish. You can just send the request and say, use a sub-agent. And Claude will just know to run that work in parallel. Here we go. Daily start Tuesday. It's actually the end of my day, but just for the sake of the example, it has a strategic context because, by the way, if I close this, in our current state, we always have what our current focus and priorities are for the week and the next month. So it knows that priority 1 is tending to our whole consulting pipeline here. The second priority is shipping. This means long form 3. Today is the last day studio filming window before May 3rd. That's what we're doing right now. So we're on track. It gives me the active tasks, which is very, very accurate. And this is what I mentioned, but the solution that I found of how to not mix up all of my personal databases, I actually have this querying one personal database so I can have one system that actually is able to be connected with both without sharing that entire thing with my team. Then it gives me my next 3 actions, and this is my favorite part. So the next things that would make today a win. Wrap up the long form 3 filming that is currently being wrapped. Schedule my second newsletter of the week. And then install Claude Code on my Mac Mini. I've already set up my Mac Mini and it knows all I need to do is install Claude Code. And then the next section is not mandatory, but I like it. And it just tells me the different principles and frameworks that I applied in order to come up with the recommended schedule for my day. So it says These are the frameworks it used, and these are just from some of my favorite frameworks. Shout out to Cal Newport for Deep Work and Slow Productivity. Highly recommend those books. Also, Getting Things Done by David Allen. Great productivity principles. So I've made my own playbooks and guides out of reading those books so that I can apply that every day I plan my day and when I plan my week. Because sometimes I like to read and just see if I agree or not. And then I can go back and forth and be like, hey, I actually don't agree with how you prioritize this. And then come up with a schedule eventually that I'm really excited about. And then here it's actually being proactive. It says, do you want to do the pre-discovery research today? And also, do you want me to add a calendar block for the Mac Mini install and the researching the new client we're speaking to? Tell me yes, no on each, and I'll create the events. I mean, they're just making it easy at this point. So the point of using sub-agents isn't just speed, by the way. It actually lets you do parallel work, but also keep the context window of your main session clean. But what I mean by that is you can only hold a certain amount of information within one chat. So it's kind of like letting another agent go off and do a whole bunch of work and then just bringing back the result or output back to the main session. So then you can have a clean workspace in your main chat. And if you want the exact template for the Team Start command that I use every day, there's a link in the description to the AI Workflows Academy where I put all the templates for these skills in the Claude for Business section. And this used to take me 15 to 20 minutes every morning, and that's not even counting potentially going down all these different rabbit holes from all these notifications. And the data is always fresh. So if my co-founder updates a task in Notion 5 minutes from now, the next time either of this runs this workflow, it'll pull the latest data. And that's because the skill is pulling straight from the Notion database every time. Also, keep in mind that you might discover you need to change the apps you use. Personally, I realized I needed to switch from the old to-do list tracking app I was using because it didn't have a good way to integrate with my AI tool. So currently I have a project and task management system in Notion, so Claude is easily able to access that database and coordinate work with my team. And here's a great question that I got the other day from the CEO of a healthcare company. They asked me, how do we know if we should buy an AI tool as opposed to building our own custom tool? And I can tell you that after building out the AI operating system for my agency as well as other businesses, it's going to be increasingly important that you can access the data from any tool. So my advice on how to approach this would be, first, how good is that pre-built tool for your specific use case? Then second, is there an easy way to integrate the data from that tool back to your AI operating system? Because you don't want to get accustomed to a tool and then finally train everyone on how to use it, only to find out later that the data is locked behind the company's walls. Y Combinator recently put out a call for AI native agencies. They want to invest in service businesses because they're predicting that with AI, they can hit software-like margins. And here's a quick breakdown. An ad campaign that used to take 5 days could now only take 1. But if you make your output faster and higher quality, you don't need to cut your price by a fifth also. So service businesses can take home a better margin. And the teams building this now are going to get the advantage and their time back. If you want help building this, that's what we do at Elevate. We work as a fractional AI team for small to mid-sized businesses and agencies. First, we map out your AI strategy. Then we actually build these workflows for you and train your team on how to use them without us. If you're interested, you can book a free AI audit for your company with the link below. Or if you want to build AI workflows yourself, we have a ton of free resources and templates in our community, the AI Workflows Academy. So that's AI assisted. It's the right kind of AI workflow when you're doing creative calls, high stakes works for your clients, or your taste and judgment really matter. But if you find yourself running a workflow and the first version is reliably good to go, that's actually a sign that you should look into moving that workflow over to being fully automated. And now it's becoming so important for business owners to understand the basics of how automation is changing. So here's a quick summary of the 3 waves of workflow automation. The first was code. Back in the day, the only way to automate specific workflows was to hire expensive developers who coded them by hand. That made custom automations have a huge barrier to entry, so only companies with engineering teams or large budgets could afford them. Everyone else just did things manually and then hoped that someone would build a software tool that they could sign up for, which a lot of the times didn't really do exactly what they were hoping for. Then we got low-code platforms. You might know Zapier, Make, N8N. These platforms are known for allowing users to create automations across thousands of apps just by clicking on these drag and drop nodes. Building automations became much easier, but still it took days to get complicated workflows running, and every time something changes, you're gonna have someone that could debug these automations. And if you weren't the one to set them up, it can be hard to really know what to look for. Now we have agentic automation. All you need to do is describe what you want, and then in real time, Claude will just build the automation across your apps and files. So the bottleneck isn't even coding anymore. And that's why most of this video has been about getting your foundation right. AI will only amplify what you already have. So if your data and processes are chaos, AI will just give you faster and automated chaos. If your foundation is solid, then the automation part actually becomes easy. So let's walk through the two types of fully automated workflows in Claude Code with a real example. Anthropic recently released a feature called Claude Routines. It lets Claude basically run on its own without you needing to prompt anything. And there's two main ways to use routines that you should know. This is the same job that apps like Zapier and Make do. But instead of needing to build it node by node in their canvas and having to debug a bunch of errors, all you need to do is describe what you want in a prompt to Claude and it'll build out the whole automation. So the first is scheduled. These go off at regular time intervals. For example, every Monday at 6 a.m., I could have an automation that scrapes all of my social media platforms, updates all of my social analytics, and then gives me a digest of what's working and what's not working. Or I can connect Claude to my QuickBooks or Stripe, and then at the end of each month, get an automated dashboard of my financials. So we can finally say goodbye to dealing with pivot tables and Excels and getting all these errors. Goodbye, pivot tables! And the second type is event triggered. Claude can run a workflow anytime something happens in your business. For example, when someone books a sales call with you, you can have an automation that researches their company, customizes your sales proposal template with that research, and then sends you a Slack with that file to review. The only real difference between these types is really that they're triggered in different ways. What they actually run could just be a prompt or a skill that you've already developed. An important thing about routines that makes it different than Claude Cowork scheduled tasks is that this can actually run in the cloud, so your laptop could be turned off and the automation will still run. All right, let's see one in action, and I really think that this one could save anyone 20 minutes a day. All right, let's talk about routines. So when you're in the desktop app, first off, I think it's most simple if you just already have a skill. So when you go to customize and then you go to skills, make sure whatever routine, hopefully you built the skill, you got it working really well, you're not making any edits. That's when I would say move it to a routine. So I made a skill that's going to give me a personal daily brief. So I'm calling it Thad Start. So now that I've imported that into my Claude, I'm going to go over to this code tab here, and it's really simple to get started with the routine. So you're going to hit new routine. I would suggest running it remotely because then you don't need your laptop to be on. Okay, so I've already created a daily brief routine here, and it's so simple. It's ridiculous. All it says is run my Thad Start skill and then post the output to my Slack daily brief. And if I open up my Slack, I have a channel that just says daily brief that I created. And so you can easily, and the way I set this up, just to walk through it really quick, is I hit remote here so that my laptop doesn't have to be on to run this. I select the correct repository. That's the AI brain folder that we've been building out this entire time. Just give it a nice name and then write your instructions. For me, it was just running the Thad Start skill and sending the output to a certain place, Slack. And then instead of needing to drag and drop and connect all these nodes and debug errors, all you need to do is make sure that you've logged into all the connectors needed for that task. And then as we discussed, you can either have a schedule triggering this routine, or you can have an event, and you can either do an event through GitHub. That's just basically a place in the cloud to store your code, or it could be with an API. So these are both forms of triggering a workflow. So I've already created mine, and it's going to go off every morning and send me a brief, but I can go ahead and run it now so you can see how it works. You can also click in if you want to see it running. And the beauty behind routines, once you set it up, is that you don't need to wait for things to load anymore. It could just happen in the background. So it's really great to wake up and just already have the brief done, even though my laptop may have been off throughout the night. Yeah, it says my personal command was not in the cloud. It's just local. It's connected to personal databases, and it's pulling from the Notion tasks, projects, and Slack channels. And then let's just go ahead and bring up the Slack so we can see when the brief comes in. Right now it's 6:10, so let's check it out. I was testing it out earlier. Here we go. It's 6:12, and at 6:12, I just got the routine output. So this week's priorities, we have the tasks that are due, active projects, dates, editor updates, and then also pending decisions. So it definitely takes a little bit of effort to set up the 3 layers, but hopefully you can see that once you get it going, it doesn't take much now to automate your tasks. And lastly, here's your friendly reminder that you don't need to set any of this up by hand. You can just in the Claude Code chat say, add a scheduled routine to pull my social metrics every Monday at 6 a.m. Claude will either do it or it'll let you know exactly what actions you need to take to get that up and running. Then you can always go watch it run or take a look in the actual Claude app when you go to Routines. So layer 1 gave Claude your business context. It knows who you are, how you work, what matters to you. Layer 2 gave it your data sources, so it can reach the tools, files, and databases you use every day. Then finally, layer 3 allowed AI to run your work, either assisting you or completely automated. And when you have all of these three together, you really have a system that doesn't exist anywhere else and gets better the more you use it. If you've ever watched Iron Man, think about Jarvis. Tony Stark didn't talk to a generic chatbot. Jarvis had full context and awareness of everything happening in his life. He had access across all of the important tech in the whole building, and he could just get a bunch of complex work done on behalf of Tony Stark. Once Claude activates the voice assistant, I think everyone's going to be naming this their Jarvis. And I know there's going to be a group of people that really push back on ideas like setting up this AI operating system, because they'll make the argument that, okay, so now anytime you need to do something demanding, you're just going to ask your AI system to do it for you. And so here's a simple question that I think anyone running a business can ask themselves to make sure they're not offloading too much of the cognitive work. Am I using AI to replace my thinking or expand my thinking? I've made videos in the past about the MIT study that scanned brains. And the long story short is when you use AI to completely replace your thinking, your brain functioning goes down over time. But the opposite is actually true if you use it to expose you to new ideas, to new situations, and new opportunities to grow. So now you know how all of this works and connects, but let me give you a roadmap so you have a clear next step on exactly what to work on today. First, to get your foundation in order. So create a folder on your laptop. You could just name it the name of your business. Then add my CLAUDE.md template and any files that you already have that give an overview of your business and your customers. This could be things like descriptions of your services, your team members, any customer research that you have. Then once you have all of that in that workspace folder for your business, you're going to open up the extension Claude Code within VS Code. Then you're just going to tell Claude Code to create your Claude instructions based on all the files that you gave it. Then connect just 3 to 5 of your main apps that you use through the connectors menu in the Claude app. You haven't built any workflows yet, and just setting this up is going to dramatically improve the results you get from your AI. And step 2, pick one workflow. Don't try to automate 10 things at once. Just start with one workflow that you're sick of doing manually. And step 3 is to turn your workflow into a skill. Map out what the workflow needs, the tools, the files, any databases. Run the entire workflow going back with Claude, narrating every decision and judgment call you're making, then reverse engineer that entire conversation into a skill. Then step 4 is to turn that skill into an automation. When the output stops needing your edits, that's your signal to move into a routine. And depending on what the work is, you can choose between scheduled and event-triggered routines. Step 5 is to place your human in the loop. This is where your judgment mitigates risks, handles edge cases, and improves AI's performance, especially for the high-stakes stuff. And step 6, extend the workflow and repeat. Find the workflow that's directly before or after the one you just automated, and then just extend what you've built. Then once you've reached the complete end of that entire process in your business, that's when you move on to the next area of your business. And repeat this enough times, and soon you'll have AI running most of the day-to-day tasks across your business. Then finally, you can use that extra time to focus on things that actually grow or expand your business, or, hallelujah, you can just have more time off. All right, that's your AI operating system. We built that in Claude Code, but really you can plug this into whatever AI tool comes out in the future. If you run a small business, I think you're in the perfect position to benefit from these AI tools. Custom systems like this used to not be obtainable unless you were a large company. But as you saw throughout this video, you don't need to be an engineer or technical at all to use AI. And that's really why I make these videos. In just the US, small businesses employ about half of the entire workforce. And my goal is to help people like you be able to get over the hump so that you can finally start getting value out of AI without all of the intimidation. And like I said, all the free resources and templates from this video are available in the free community, the AI Workflows Academy. The link is in the description. See you on the next one.